The trail is a metaphor for change. Although hiking, and specifically endurance hiking, is now a big part of my day-to-day, it's not just about exercise. It's about transformation. Each step is a movement towards clarity, purpose, and identity. But movement is one thing, sharing insights gained is another. As a U.S. Marine veteran, I created this space to help other veterans gain clarity, purpose, and identity. Let's walk this path together. This is Trail to Transformation.
Most people aren't broken, they're just dysregulated. Chronic stress, pain, anxiety, and burnout aren't mindset failures. They're nervous systems stuck in survival. I'm Leland Holgate, combat veteran and neuroscientist, and I created the Welcome Home method to help people rewire their nervous systems with breath. And to go deeper, visit thewillfulwarrior.com.
Hey, I want to welcome everybody back to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. And for those who have been watching for quite some time now, heartfelt thanks. Before we get into the conversation, a quick disclaimer. We're going to be talking directly about suicide and healing. So if that's going to trigger anybody who is watching or listening, just know that up front. So take care of yourself. If, however, you are finding yourself in a crisis situation or know somebody who is, please text or call 988. That's our crisis hotline here in the US. I'm not quite sure internationally, but if you're having issues, please find a first responder now. Let's get into the conversation. Candice, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me, Keith.
I appreciate it. Before we get into the conversation, tell us quickly about who you are. I don't typically do a bio anymore, kind of read off anybody's list of achievements. That's going to be your job. So tell us who you are.
I'm Candice Snyder here in New Jersey, and I am a podcast host of Passion, Purpose, and Possibilities. And Keith, you and I go way back.
We do. And so let's kind of give us, our audience, some insight into that. We grew up together. Tell us really quickly how we grew up together.
Oh, let's say it's the late 60s, 70s in Philadelphia. We lived on the same street, and our mothers were actually pregnant at the same time. Your mom with you, and my mom with my sister. And then, my family moved to New Jersey, so we didn't stay as close,
Yeah.
and then kind of reconnected, I don't know, maybe 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Yeah, through podcasting.
hmm
Yeah, so it's really cool. So that kind of gives our audience some insight as to how old we are, but all good. And so I invited you here specifically because of the very nature of why I created Trail to Transformation. So I have attempted suicide 5 times in my life. So between 1996 and 2021, made 5 attempts. But you have firsthand experience with suicide. Can you real briefly tell us about what that experience is?
Yes. So I had a younger brother. I was, myself, my brother, then a younger sister. And my brother took his own life in 2003. And this year will be 23 years since he passed. He had suffered from depression and bipolar disorder for many, many years, but we didn't know that. I think growing up in the 70s and even, 80s, we didn't look at depression and mental illness the way we look at it today. We have a long way to go today, but back then I think my parents just thought it was childhood angst and teenage angst. And approximately 8 months before my brother died, he said to me, "I've been depressed since I'm 9 years old." He ended up in a behavioral health center. He was there for a week. They said they told us that he was not suicidal, and then he died 6 months later.
So I know for me, and I've had these conversations before, when people ask me, is there anything that anybody else could have done, when I go through these cycles? And my statement to that question is no, not really, because we or I am doing it so well, trying to hide the symptomology of I'm alone, I feel angry, overwhelmed, whatever that is going through my system. Now, I can't speak directly for your brother, but we do our best to hide any kind of signs or symptomology from others. But I do have to ask the question, was there anything that was your brother was showing that could have said to the world around him that he needed some type of help or intervention?
My brother definitely was the go-to guy, right? He was the class clown. He had a ton of friends. They all looked up to him. They all put him kind of on a pedestal, like he could do no wrong, and if anybody else was struggling, they would go to him. And my brother's name is Mike, and he hit it really, really well. He was what I would say probably is determined high functioning depression, because on the outside it looked like he was doing everything right. He had a successful career, he had a beautiful family. As I said, he was very social. And so looking back, I think he hit it really well. Were there a few instances where we could see that he was not happy? Yes, we definitely saw that. My family was very open in talking to him. I was very open in talking to him, except, there came a point in time where I lived 3,000 miles away from him.
Mhm. You said there were times where he looked or behaved, he was not happy. In retrospect, um, just based on your experiences, is there a difference between being unhappy? Because sometimes we all get unhappy, we all get sad, we all get down. Situations and circumstances in life challenge us. Did unhappiness versus, I'm really not doing well, may sound, seem, look, feel differently? Um, can you talk to that a bit?
I I don't think like he looked different. I mean, he was still doing things. He was played sports. He had like I mentioned, social. So he was always with friends, and he had a really close knit group of guys from like middle school, high school, through college, all the way, beyond that. Um, and he talked to them, but I really think what he was feeling deep down inside, he was hiding. He was keeping that to himself. Yeah, there became a time where he had some marital problems. I think that was the biggest problem for him, feeling like he's not successful in his marriage, because it was always about, being bigger, better, best. That was one of the characteristics, that he portrayed. Like he always had to go big.
Let's move past, because again, I've done it 5 times. I made the attempt. I always say I'm not very good at it, and probably that's either by fate or on purpose, that I have to have these conversations now about not just the trauma, because I'm sure you, your younger sister, the entire family was traumatized by the event. I don't want to really focus on that because trauma looks differently in different situations. But I want to talk about moving forward, moving past the healing and the transformation. After it happened, what was the next step forward for you, for family?
For me, I went into caregiver mode, right? I didn't grieve right away because my mind automatically went to, I have to take care of my kids. I have to take care of my parents, my sister, and I have to hold everybody together. So it wasn't until a year later, and in the Jewish religion, you usually do like an unveiling after you have, a burial. And it wasn't until that moment where my grief really started. And it affected everyday life. There wasn't a day that I'm not thinking about it or and trying to wrap my head around it. For me, I went into how can I take this experience and bring some kind of positivity. I know that's a crazy word to use in this situation, but what can I do to help other people? And so I started to become involved in community walks and raise awareness around mental health. And, it's been 23 years and I'm still doing that. And that is how I continue to heal. You, throughout the year, there are triggers, right? There's his birthday, the anniversary that he died, different family moments, celebrations, and I'll be thinking like, he's not here, he should be here. But I know that there isn't anything I could have done to change it. The only thing I can do now is to really support other people and keep talking about it so that we change the conversation and we hopefully someday take the stigma away from the word suicide.
And I was going to, talk directly about that, or even ask you about that, because that is one of the themes, the motivations for everybody who is trying to have these conversations, willing to have these conversations, or is doing some type of grief work, and you have a podcast on your own, is making them normal. Making the conversation normal, being able to use the word without feeling that I'm doing something wrong, and I'm really using very simple words at this point. How has that been for you? How have you been able to engage in these types of conversations? One, so that it's normal for you and the healing continues, but helping other people feel the same way, that they can talk about it and not feel overwhelmed, grieved, or just whatever the awkwardness is.
So I have learned a lot in the 4+ years of having the podcast, and I feel lucky that I've had quite a few guests in the grief space. So I've learned a lot over the last 4 years. And grief being cumulative, right? Not really processing what happened, when my brother died and other experiences that happened on top of that. I mean, it was an unraveling. I had to do an unraveling. I ended up hiring one of those grief counselors.
And how did that work? I think you told me about that some time ago, maybe offline in a conversation. How did that work?
It was the best thing that I could have ever done, truly.
So before, is it a therapist or a coach, and you don't have to name names or who she is,
A grief coach.
grief coach, and without having to differentiate between what a therapist is and what a coach is, coaching moves people forward where, and this is just a summary, and where therapists kind of do a deep dive into the background of whatever the trauma is for recovery and healing. For you, coaching meant what, and what value was it for you?
So I felt like it was a combination of both. Yes, we
Okay.
had to go back and look at, some of the things that, I experienced while my brother and I were growing up, right? I remembered having to do this timeline, and it was like the sweet and salty is what she called it, right? It was like above the line was sweet and below the line was salty. Like, not every relationship is perfect, right? And so it was going back and looking at that, kind of deciphering those events, and then the feelings that I had now going forward, right? If there was any forgiveness that needed to be done, we discussed that. And then how to move forward um, with a clear mind and a clear heart.
I like the word forgiveness, and I'm glad that you actually brought it up. So people might be thinking, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm in this circumstances. I'm overwhelmed. Talk to me, talk to us, those who are watching and listening. What do you mean by forgiveness in this state of transformation and healing?
You know, I think sometimes and often people are mad, they're angry. Um, I can look at how my dad reacted. My dad was very angry after my brother died. He just could not get past the, like, how could he do this? And not understand the depth of my brother's pain. My brother was in pain, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, all of it. And I think that when you do forgive, it is for yourself. It's not really like for the other person. And that's another thing that people have a hard time with. But you cannot move forward if you are stuck in angry, sad, all the emotions, that you experience. You're not going to be able to move forward if you don't process them.
Some people, and again, this is generality without identifying anything specific, find comfort in that. In being stuck, that is, being in a situation where they have these emotions, because even negative emotions can feel good sometimes because you're letting out this energy, basically. And they don't want to move forward. But for you, you felt that you needed to move forward. You felt that there was a need to do something about all of this, whether you knew it instinctively that you needed healing for yourself. And I'll go back to me for just a second, because I do want to focus on how you were able to process all this. My fifth attempt in 2021, the 5 minutes after that I'm still alive, and then moving forward, I actually felt that I needed to move forward. And for me at that time, and again, 5 years ago, that meant making connections, friends, having a group of people around me that I'd never had before, ever, truly, in the 30 years since 1996. What was it? Why was it so meaningful for you to move forward, to heal, to do something about this situation?
I just felt like mental health in general. I mean, I've experienced my own mental health challenges, right?
Mm-hmm.
I did not want to continue to be in this cycle of unhappiness and overwhelm. And that's why I was like, what can I do to try to turn the situation around and bring something that is helpful to others, to the world? And that is how my healing happened, is by getting involved in creating Team Mo for the Out of Darkness walks, by taking a course if somebody lost a family or friend to suicide, I had some training to be able to go to that person's home to be a support system, not to share my story, but to help them process theirs. I never was called though to actually go. So that never happened. I never experienced that, but I did have training for that. I did try to go to the hotline to become, a person at the call center, and got through I think 8 classes, and then I was like I couldn't do it. It was too much. Emotionally, it was too much for me. I felt bad about that for a long time until I had a conversation with somebody recently that said, you know what, you're doing so many other things. Don't beat yourself up for not being able to continue that program.
Yeah, and for me, the same thing. I couldn't be a first responder. I couldn't be on a call center. Thus, the nature of Trail to Transformation isn't a first responder situation. Neither is the foundation. It's about education and building community and building awareness. And so there are people who can emotionally, physically, cognitively, mentally be in that space. And for us, it's okay not to be. And it took me a while because I wanted to. I actually said, I need to give back somehow. This is my space to give back. Let's move. We're in the last part of the conversation because I'm checking time. Your podcast. Talk to me about your podcast and how this is kind of the evolution of from then to now.
So, I mean, the podcast started because of wanting to talk about causes people cared about most and the gratitude and the giving back piece. And I was like, okay, it'll be a platform for maybe some organizations that don't get a lot of acknowledgement to put it out into the universe. And then I was like, wait a minute. This gives me a platform to talk about mental health in every aspect. And really, when I'm talking to people about their stories of transformation and how they found their path to purpose, it always involves mental health in some way, shape, or form. So, I mean, sometimes it's more specific. I might be talking to somebody about anxiety or ADHD or some other kind of challenge, but it's all tied together. Like, it affects all of us in some way, some more than others. Some have more challenges than others, but it gives us a way to connect. And that is something that I realized the more I do the podcast, we are more alike than different.
So you're building community. And that's one of the things we talk about on Trailer Transformation and through the foundation is building a community. The reason I started the foundation is because I know what it's like to be isolated and feel so overwhelmed that there's nobody to reach out to. So what I'm trying to do is build that community of professionals and support that I wish I had each of the times that I attempted suicide. How are you, through your podcast, creating that community, that voice that others can be seen, heard, understood, and feel value from it?
I think there's a couple things. One is, yes, people can listen to other people's stories and know that they're not alone. So even though they may not know the person, physically know the person, they can hear that person and know, like, okay, I felt the same way as this person. I'm not alone. So I know there's other people out there that are having the same kind of challenges. Mm-hmm. Often, I'm always thinking, who can I connect my guest to? Like, if I meet somebody, I know there's somebody else that they have to meet. Like, there are people that I have sent your way that I feel you need to talk to because they may be a good guest for you, or they might just be somebody you need to have a conversation with. So it may not be a group. It might be like one-on-one conversations, but I'm building community that way.
And I love it. And recently, you actually have sent some people to me, so I do have to have those conversations. I haven't had them yet. I do want to thank you for that. 1 minute left. One final nugget of truth, of power, empowerment. Candice, leave our audience with something incredible.
Okay, so, I have this quote on my wall here that I look at every single day, and I think this really helps. And this is where purpose comes in. So when you walk in purpose, you collide with destiny. And we all have a purpose, and there is all something that we are meant to do. And I encourage, our listeners to think about the things that you're most passionate about. And often it's the passion and the purpose that collide and lead you to what you're supposed to be doing.
Candice, I love it. Thank you so much. For those of you who have watched us, if you want to join us in conversation, contact me or my producer, Laura Cross. And as always, we will see you on the trail. Take care.
Thank you for watching Trailer Transformation TV. To support these conversations or to support the foundation, I would ask that you go to givebutter.com/T3missionorg That's the letter T, the number 3, MISSIONORG. Or go directly to our website at t3mission.org and click the donate button. Or just scan the QR code as you see it on the screen. And as always, I will see you on the trail.